Spring has sprung, the rains have come, Holy Week is right around the corner here in Spain, and apparently there was a partial solar eclipse the other day, but I must have missed it. Either way, the march of time continues. It's the 10th year of the reign of His Serene Majesty Felipe VI, the third month of 2025 according to the Gregorian calendar, and the Chinese Year of the Snake. I try to make these podcasts evergreen, but it sometimes doesn't work as expected. More on that later. Today, I want to talk about the Spanish schedule, the time zone, the controversy around daylight saving time, the late nights and even later mornings. It's all on the table, as is the influence of Hitler on Spain's foreign policy, the legacy of Franco's dictatorship, Elon Musk's heartfelt gesture of a couple of months ago, Kanye West's latest shenanigans, and much more. Hey everybody, it's Daniel. Welcome back to Spain to Go, the best podcast in the entire multiverse for all things Spain. This is episode 104 about Spanish daylight savings time and the legacy of fascism, etc. I'd like to give a shout out to Bob. Bob is a multiple donor here at the podcast. He was also out here in Barcelona with his friend Bob several months ago, so we all had some tapas, me and Bob. Thank you very much for your donation, Bob. If you would like to donate, please head by expatmadrid.com/donate. That's where the donation page is. You can donate anything from €3 up to however much you want. I appreciate it all, and everything helps. I'm here doing this in my free time because I like talking about Spain. I also have apparently no other options psychologically but to be a writer, so I am writing about Spain. I also write other things, but this is significantly more fun than your average writing project. So expatmadrid.com/donate. Support the cause here. Thank you once again, Bob, for your support. Years ago, I wrote an article about the Spanish timetable, about how we're in the Central European time zone despite Spain being geographically south of London, all of which means it's light until 10:30 p.m. in summer and dark until 9 a.m. in winter. I also wrote about the government's occasional promises to end the daylight savings scheme and move us into the right time zone for a better use of natural light. I called the article "Spanish Timetable Getting You Down? Blame Hitler." In previous years, I've tried to redo that article, but it's a product of its time. The Partido Popular was in power back then, and we were in the middle of that massive economic crisis that lasted for about 6 years. You may remember it, the Great Recession. People in those days thought that maybe Spain's efficiency problems could be solved by a change in time zone. Get people into bed earlier, wake up earlier, and we'll magically become Switzerland and double our salaries, or something like that. Doing the research back in 2013, I found that the original reason Spain was in the same time zone as Germany may have been Spanish dictator Francisco Franco's desire to cozy up to Hitler during World War II. Franco and Hitler met only once at a train station in Hendaye on the Spanish-French border. This was in October 1940, and Hitler wanted to talk about the possibility of the Spanish entering the war on the side of the Axis powers. What actually happened in the meeting is still debated here in Spain. Perhaps Franco was so unreasonable and annoying that even Hitler couldn't stand him. Or, and I like this second explanation better, Franco, the master negotiator, demanded so many concessions from Germany that it was easier for the Führer to just drop the matter. I believe one of the things that Franco allegedly asked for is for Spain to get back Gibraltar. Gibraltar is an issue that is sort of touchy around here. The British own a little bit on the south end of Spain. It's been this way for a few hundred years. The Spanish want it back. The British don't want to give it up. I'm sure there's an interesting story I could talk about one day if I decided to do the research. Now what I know is that people go to Gibraltar, British people go to Gibraltar for a few days if they need to leave the Schengen zone. For visa purposes, they need to appear back on British territory for a couple of days. Also, people go there to get married. They make it really easy to get married, so wedding tourism is sort of a thing. I have no idea why Spain makes it so difficult to get married, but there are a couple of places in Europe where if you need to get married, quickly and easily, you can just pop across the border and get married the next day. Gibraltar is one of them. Anyway, Franco wanted Gibraltar and Hitler wanted Franco to leave him alone after this meeting. They never saw each other again. Spain stayed out of World War II, and as a result, Franco lived for another 35 years and stayed in power the whole time. And here we are. Modern European Spain apparently stuck in the Central European time zone and with no way of getting out. All this despite the 80 years since the end of the war and the 50 years since Franco's death. It's an interesting story, but maybe not true. Today I found an article on the BBC that quotes an astronomer named Pere Planesas, who doubts that Hitler had anything to do with the time zone change. It may have simply been intended to improve the economy in times of general scarcity. The theory that changing the clock will somehow improve efficiency has been around for a long time, in other words. In any case, the time zone change happened just a few months before Franco's meeting with Hitler in Hendaye, and people have connected the time zone change to Nazism for decades. A few other things have changed since my previous article about the Spanish time zone, making a lot of what I said back then obsolete or otherwise unfunny. Consider, please, the following. 1. In the approximately 12 years since the original article, I've gotten thoroughly sick of reporting on what the Spanish government claims it's going to do. Most of it never happens, but I didn't know that at the time. 2. Telling people to blame Hitler was funnier back then, but now it just seems to fall flat. People are comparing everything to Hitler all the time, so the joke just doesn't work anymore. From Elon Musk's heartfelt gesture at the January 2025 inauguration, to the constant "just like Hitler would have done" comments every time the president signs an executive order, the Nazis are having a bit of a moment. Don't even get me started on Kanye West and his coming out as a full-fledged fan of the Nazi Party. Yuck. Anyway, you can read the old article if you want, but I no longer like it. That's why I'm writing today. Because it's another spring out here in beautiful Spain, and as we set the clocks forward for daylight saving time, I thought it would be interesting to revisit the issue. Is the EU keeping us in the dark? Maybe. Around 2018, the EU issued a recommendation that countries should stop changing time zones twice a year, and the government promised to follow through. But like I said, they do very little of what they say they will, and what does get done is done badly. So logically, they did nothing. Then the pandemic happened, and they spent 2 more years telling people it was dangerous to go outside. What does the position of the sun matter anyway? You could get a deadly virus out there. So Spain's time zone was moved to the back burner. In the meantime, the Great Recession had ended, at least in theory, so increasing efficiency in order to keep up with the rest of Europe didn't seem as urgent as it once had. See my recent article and podcast about the idea that Spain has the world's best economy for more about that. That's episode 99, Spain, the world's best economy, allegedly. So just when I had started to think that the whole time zone change was a lost cause, I got a shred of hope. I saw an article today. Apparently, some of the legacy media outlets are now saying that the Boletín Oficial del Estado, the official state gazette, has published a date for the final time change. According to ABC and other media, October 25th, 2026 is the end of daylight savings, and we will afterwards be staying on the winter time schedule forever. Usually when things make it to the Boletín Oficial del Estado, I start believing them. With this particular issue, I don't really know anymore. Still, I hope it's true. The usual arguments against daylight saving time zone changes are the following. 1. Nobody has really proven, despite decades of trying, that it works to save energy. 2. The loss of an hour of sleep in spring can cause health problems, including heart attacks, in places where daylight saving is practiced. 3. Basically, it's annoying and stupid. The heart attack claim has been reported everywhere at this point, but also the Mayo Clinic has released a study saying that while there is a slight uptick in the rate of heart attacks after daylight saving time comes into effect every year, it isn't clinically significant. Keep in mind that some studies suggest that there's more crime on days with a full moon, for example, and that the correlation versus causation thing is complicated. So, I don't know. Personally, I hate changing the clocks twice a year. I hate the moment when suddenly it starts getting dark at 5 p.m. in winter. And I would rather not practice daylight saving. Getting sunlight in the morning and evening is what keeps our circadian rhythms on schedule, and that's important for everyone's health. Just ask Stanford University scientist and podcaster Andrew Huberman, who has a lot to say about sunlight. As usual, I'm just a guy with a blog and a podcast, not a doctor or a member of parliament, so I can't do anything about daylight saving except talk about it here on the podcast. Let's talk a bit more about the Spanish schedule, though. The other day I asked around on Facebook to see what the culture shock issues were for people moving from the US to Spain. I've been in Spain for over 20 years. My culture shock has worn out. I wanted to see if the original issues that caused me to feel culture shock are still relevant, or if people have some long list of new things. It turns out it's pretty much the same as it was 20 years ago. One of the biggest culture shock issues is dinner at 9:30 p.m. I still remember my first flatmate Javi coming home at 6 p.m. one day back in 2004 and finding me in the kitchen eating a plate of spaghetti. "What are you doing, Dani?" he exclaimed. "Is this lunch or is it dinner?" In the Spanish mind, 6 p.m. is no time for spaghetti, and that's fine. These days, Morena and I usually have dinner at 8 or 8:30, but that can sometimes be later if we have social plans or if it takes a long time to cook. One of the main issues with the Spanish timetable is that it affects every other aspect of life. Late dinners mean people get to bed late. People wake up late. They start working at 9 a.m. or later. They take long lunches around 2 p.m., which means they don't finish work until late in the evening. That's why dinner is at 9 or 10. People just work late. That's also why people were worried about Spanish efficiency back in the day. I don't know if people are talking about this as much anymore, but years ago people used to be great admirers of places like Germany or Switzerland where the clock hits 5 p.m., everybody just closes their laptops and goes home. Here in Spain, they have a work culture where if your boss sees you staying late, he will appreciate it, think you're a hard worker, and possibly promote you. So for that reason also, people tend to spend longer at work than they might in other countries. Also, talking about the late nights, supposedly funny late-night TV shows only start when people can be home to watch them, and they, the TV shows, don't finish until 11 or so. I haven't lived in a house with a television set in more than 10 years, and I figured everyone just streamed shows on Netflix by now. But apparently some people are still watching broadcast TV. In my research today, I learned that there's a fierce competition between Pablo Motos and David Broncano for Spanish late-night TV viewership, with some controversy surrounding Broncano's €14 million a year salary. It's like Jay Leno versus David Letterman back in the 90s, but because Broncano's show is on Televisión Española, the public broadcaster, his salary is being paid by taxpayers like you and me. As a result of all this hilarious late-night TV, which apparently people are watching, Spanish people go through life in a sleep-deprived haze, snatching siestas under olive trees if they can. But let's be honest, in a big city like Barcelona, olive trees are pretty rare. These days, Scientific American suggests that Newton was wrong and that time may not exist at all. Personally, I wouldn't go that far, but the concept of clock time is something that exists mostly in our heads. Just watch mothers trying to go somewhere with small kids. "Hurry up, we're late," says mom, but the kid doesn't know what that means at all. Mom may try to make the kid arrive on time, and the school system will probably make further attempts later on, but still, some people never learn. What is being on time, really? Punctuality is an Anglo-Saxon social construct, but the 30 minutes I'm going to spend blow-drying my hair are demanded by science. So lighten up. That's a lesson I learned repeatedly back when I was dating Spanish girls. In fact, trying to do things with wet hair is one of the leading causes of death among Spanish women. Ask anyone. I've got an episode on here about dating Spanish girls. It is episode 8, if you would like to hear that. And seen through that lens, what is time anyway? What does it matter if the sun comes up at 5 or goes down at 10? It doesn't really make a difference. It's all just an illusion. So, should we blame Franco or Hitler for Spain's time zone woes? Maybe. Or maybe, as the saying goes, we should just lighten up. Speaking of which, that's exactly what the sun is doing outside my balcony window right now. Happy spring, everyone. I'm going outside. That's about all I've got for today. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you once again to Bob for his generous donation. You can donate at expatmadrid.com/donate. Any amount helps. Thank you very much. Speaking of fascism, I have just purchased a copy of Paul Preston's biography of Franco. It's 1,000 pages long. I read a lot more than your average person, I assume, but 1,000 pages is a long book. I don't think I'm going to be done with it anytime soon. It arrives from Amazon on Wednesday, so I will get back to you in the next 3 to 6 months about the life of Franco. Like I mentioned, it's 50 years since he died, and I mean, he's the defining character in 20th century Spain. I was thinking this morning that if your average person actually knows the names of 2 people who were involved in the Spanish Civil War, it's probably George Orwell and Franco, who came out as the eventual winner. I've got George Orwell here on the podcast. That is episode 37. Also Peter Kemp, who wrote an account of the Spanish Civil War that is just as good, possibly better than Orwell's. He turns out to be on the opposite side. You can check that out. That's episode 38. The book is called Mine Were of Trouble, which is a line from a poem that, British schoolboys were reading back in those days. Anyway, episodes 37 and 38 are about the Spanish Civil War. I will definitely have more to say about Franco and the Spanish Civil War and, all of the stuff when I get through the biography. Here in Barcelona a few years ago, I was told off by a waiter because I was in a bar reading a copy of the Spanish Constitution. And of course, the Spanish Constitution is controversial here in Catalonia. So I probably won't be able to take Franco's biography to the park and read in public without, getting yelled at by old Catalan guys or something. Holy Week is right around the corner. I may have more to say about Holy Week before it happens, but for now, episode 34 of this podcast is about Holy Week. You can also go by expatmadrid.com and read my article about Holy Week in Madrid. It's actually an article about Holy Week in Spain generally. Madrid is just the keyword I was using back then because I was living in Madrid and I was writing about it, but I have updated the article. There's now a vocabulary section. Lots to say about Holy Week. Head over to YouTube and type in Learn Spanish with Daniel. I have a series of videos over there that are helping people to learn Spanish. I'm going to make something new this week on there, hopefully. I don't think I have much else on my plate this week that's going to keep me from doing it, so I will. Maybe about gender in Spanish. I have a previous video about words that change meaning according to gender. For example, pulpa and pulpo are completely different things. But there's a lot to say about gender in Spanish because, everything in Spanish has a gender. A table is feminine, a door is feminine, a building is masculine, a coconut is masculine. It's just every noun has a gender. So it's an issue that is grammatically important. And of course, people have conversations about gender these days. It is worth talking about. So, Learn Spanish with Daniel over on YouTube. Every episode of the podcast is also over on YouTube if you would like to have a listen over there. Like I said, this is episode 104. I've been doing about one episode a week these days, so there will probably be something next week. I'm not sure exactly what. Just keeping on top of all this content creation before I'm replaced by some, chat GPT robot. You can follow me on Instagram if you would like. Just look for my name, Daniel Welsh, Welsch. I'm over there on Instagram. You could buy my books on Amazon. I don't think you need them personally. If you can listen to this podcast in English, I can pretty much guarantee that you don't need me to teach you English. But my books are for people who want to learn English. If you have Spanish-speaking friends who are trying to learn English, you should definitely buy them some copies of my books, though. I am on Amazon. Look for Daniel Welsh over there. I've got over a dozen books at this point, which can help people to learn more English. That's all I've got for today. I hope you have a great spring, and thanks, as always, for listening. Hasta la próxima.